Welcome, golf fans, pursuers of knowledge and the almighty dollar. This is your golf guru bringing you a course breakdown, picks, projections, pivots, fades, and oh yes, the winner for the 120th U.S. Open at Wingfoot. If you're new to the show, please click the subscribe button below, and I put out content weekly, so you will be notified when that happens. So I'd appreciate that greatly. And if you are getting some value from this, from my show, please click the like button. I would also greatly appreciate that. If you're new to fantasy golf, you also need to check out, I made a kind of, for new golfers, the Fantasy Golf 101 video that provides you everything you need to know to build the optimal lineups, where to get started. I'll leave a link for that below. And if you're a regular attendee to the show, thank you very much for being here. So let's do this. All right, some fast facts. Let's talk about, we got Wingfoot here in beautiful Mamaroneck, New York. They are playing the West Course. They have 36 holes, and this is a par 70, close to 7,500 yards, and it is POA greens, and the average green size is around 6,500 square feet. Just for some kind of mental note on that, it's about double the size of Pebble Beach. The comp courses we will be looking at today are Bethpage Black, also in New York, Chambers Bay, Shinnecock Hills. Those all have POA greens. But if you want to get a few more players involved in some rounds, I'm also going to be looking at Balsa Roll and PGA National. So just real quickly, these greens are crazy undulation, and they're going to be, very fast. And from the bunkers that protect the greens, some are over the size of the actual player, so over 6-7 feet. So very well protected with fairway, but the green bunkers. So long story short, very, very tough greens. The whole course is going to play very tough. We'll get a little more into that. Just a side note, player field is down to 144 players instead of the typical 156, and a lot of this is due to they were not able to do the U.S. section qualifiers. Some players of note that will be not playing, sad to say, Scotty Scheffler, our fantasy darling, and Sam Horsfield, who is a European player who has been doing very well over there. They're both out due to a positive COVID-19 test, which I hope that it is I hope they don't have COVID, but we've seen this in the past where, these tests come up as a false negative, I guess a simple, or a false positive, my apologies. And also lastly, Wangong Huang is also out, which not too big of a loss there. But because of these, some players have been recently added. Just for note, Brandon Grace and Sabatini have been added to the field, and they're both priced around 6,400, 6,500. I think 6,400 to 6,700. I think Grace is at 6,400, Sabatini's at 6,700. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what I saw when we got that information. And latest Tiger Woods report, he did have a practice round today, and everything that I heard from, again, boots on the ground, that he struggled mightily off the tee. He's missing it left quite a bit, and who knows if he was trying some different things. So you can't take that to heart, but just a side note that you're going to need to be in the fairways, and we're going to talk a little more about that. Some of the most challenging holes, it starts off very tough and ends very tough, but the ninth hole is one of the toughest par fours in major history. 514 yards, and like I said, it makes it one of the longest holes ever in major history. The 12th hole is 640 yard par 5, and is the sixth longest hole in major championships history. And the easiest hole by birdie percent is hole number 5. It's the shorter, well, I don't want to say short, but it is the shorter of the two par 5s. Again, par 70, only two par 5s. Also, boots on the ground, which if you've been listening or seen any of the coverage, that the rough is around 5 inches. Could get up to 6 by Sunday, and so they need to maybe do, they might cut it over the weekend just a little bit, give it a trim. Gary Woodland was talking that literally in his practice rounds, he was just doing some chipping around the greens. They threw some balls down and literally took them 5 minutes to find some of the balls. So long story short, it is going to be crazy. And they've actually brought in more staff, actually members of Wingfoot to come out there and help locate these balls, because the rounds are going to take quite a long time if not. And just side note, weather looks really good for the tournament, which is great. I think on Thursday, it's going to get up in the mid 70s. And then kind of the rest of Friday, Saturday, Sunday is going to be in the mid to high 60s. No rain forecasted at this time. If you are going to play Showdown, make sure you check Wind Finder for each day, and just kind of see what the wind's doing and if the weather changes. I am recording this Tuesday evening around 9:30 Eastern. So, some things could definitely change, but that's the latest and greatest. The player profiles we will be targeting, we're going to be looking, of course, for very accurate guys off the tee that just need average PGA Tour length. The bombers that we know, are probably going to be looking to take less than driver on mini holes. Phil Mickelson was talking earlier today, and he's really hitting the 3-wood a lot out there, just working with that. But there's going to be the long irons, there's going to be the hybrids, everything for the. So what I see is that the typical the bombers are going to kind of lose that that length, because hitting the fairways is at most premium. Typical scores here, is going to be plus 4 or 5 strokes. I think the lowest at Wingfoot that we know of is on the far right there. You see Jeff Ogilvy, who I believe I think shot 4 under and won in that playoff against Phil Mickelson, if I remember right. That was 2006. So yeah, as you see there, some past champions. Of course, Gary Woodland last year, where he can hit the ball a long way, but he chipped and putted lights out for him, way above average. So that's what's going to have to happen here. It's going to be typical, the guys that have that crazy putting round, but they're also going to have to chip like we've never seen. Of course, our two-time defending champion Brooks Koepka, as we all know, will not be playing. He is out, withdrew for the tournament. The knee, he's still trying to rehab. And then DJ, prior to that, which I believe was 2016, won his I think one and only major, but definitely his only U.S. Open. Okay, what else do we want to talk about? I think we can get into and then lastly, how to watch the actual tournament. I want to pull this out. There is no PGA Live. Typically for the majors, PGA Live is not allowed to cover them. So where you're going to get your not peak time, so the mornings and the late evenings, especially on Thursday, Friday, you need to go to the Golf Channel, but also because it's on NBC. Back to NBC, Peacock will be streaming it live in the mornings. So just kind of give you a heads up, if you want to watch more coverage than what's just being shown on NBC, check out the Golf Channel, check out Peacock. And I've already signed up. It's free membership, subscription or whatever. So that way there we can get all the coverage. All right, let's do this. Let's start to dive into some of the players. Okay, so I ran a model. Again, compliments Fantasy National. If you don't have access to Fantasy National, I'm going to give you a lot of information from it, but I highly recommend that if you're going to start getting pretty serious about this, it's amazing the information that you can pull and the models you can build. But I created a custom model, and what I did for this, I did look at recent form. I think it was past 36 rounds. But what I wanted to also look at, as we kind of mentioned, was the comp courses. And so, of course, what we're looking at is Bethpage Black, Chambers Bay, Shinnecock, PGA National, Balsarol, and, of course, Wingfoot. the areas that I found, so looking at the past tournaments and the top 10 finishers, the things that they had to do very well to succeed at this course and courses like it. You know, 3-putt avoidance is going to be huge. You know, good drives and fairways gained. They are two different within Fantasy National, but very similar. But weighed those very heavily. Like I said, hitting fairways is going to be the utmost premium. Bogey avoidance. Of course, you know, there's going to be bogeys out here, but I just wanted to see who, you know, typically bogey and double bogey avoidance. A lot of lengthy par fours was a key area. Again, fairways gained, I added that in again, just re-emphasizing. And sorry, just a second. And putting is going to be a key. And then one that stood out that I typically don't see, but you know, getting up and down from the sand saves is, and I kind of talked about how many bunkers are protecting these greens, very deep bunkers. So that's going to be huge. And then proximity 75 to 100 showed up. That is if you, of course, hit off the fairway and you just try to get back and play. You know, what I've been hearing is even Tiger, who is one of the best players out of the rough, you know, they're getting maybe 100 yards. If you get in this rough, you're definitely not going to be going for the green or getting it too close. So you're going to have to be very accurate to make your par from 75 to 100. And then, of course, if you do hit the fairway on these very long par fours, you're going to need to be very accurate from the 175 to 200. So that was the key things that I looked at when building these models. And what you're going to see is four guys here that that kind of stood out to me. And why is that I've also got some other models we ran and some other things we're going to look at. But just wanted to highlight, here was 4 guys that just kept showing up over and over, at least in a few of the different models and different ways to look at it. So Paul Casey, Ches Reavie, Fitzpatrick, and Day. We're going to talk about those guys more in depth. I am going to go through quite a few people on here in depth to kind of pick out the guys, and also we'll talk about the chalk. So also what I wanted to look at was, you know, we've had already a few tournaments this year that were very U.S. Open-like. The conditions, the scoring, the rough, and one was, of course, just recently the BMW Championship, Olympia Fields. You know, who did well there? What was, you know, using the same stats that I want to look at for this. Let's look at some different courses and look at how they did. So, of course, John Rahm won it, and he shows up again on a few different ones. So I just wanted to highlight him here. But of course, DJ, as he, you know, just kicked butt through the FedEx. I'm trying to think of anyone else that stood out. You know, I said Scotty Scheffler. I was bummed that he is not going to be in this. But Brian Harman, and we'll dive into Brian, but I think he could be a nice little sleeper play, and we'll talk about why. And then looking at TPC Harding Park, again, very similar course. Maybe not as PGA Championship wasn't as tough, but it was a tough track for them to play. Of course, Colin Morikawa pops up, as you'll see. Casey is in there again. Again, Scotty. But DeChambeau, you know, is popping up on a couple of these too, and we'll talk about Bryson in more length. But you know, a lot of people are kind of throwing him aside, and I think that's maybe a mistake. Jason Days pops again here, and a few guys that we'll touch on. Ches Reavie down below. Anyways, let's keep moving through. The last one I looked at, I wanted to look at, was the Memorial at Murifield at Jack's Place. And again, if you remember, if you watched that tournament, it was some tough weather, but also the greens were crazy. So they played the Workday event, if you remember, right before the Memorial. And the Workday, you know, they actually, you know, had some, you know, low scores who won that. But then, of course, they let the rough out, sped up the greens. The weather came in, and it was a battle. And so what that tells me is, you know, the conditions, of course, you know, again, not as a U.S. Open, but pretty close, but the mental fortitude to win under those conditions. And again, you'll see, and of course, Rahm, you know, won that. And but Matthew Wolff also pops up a couple times in this. Of course, you know, he has the length, but he also has some accuracy. You know, if you look at under those key stats, of course, it was just 4 rounds for that tournament. The sand saves was about the low one. Okay, so who's, again, I'm recording this late Tuesday night, but I want to already kind of get into, who's already chalky. And, of course, we were talking about, Rahm. Again, I always say this. I'm not saying don't play him. All I'm doing is saying, hey, just so you know, here's the highest already projected ownerships. And so if you are looking to differentiate, which that's what we're trying to do, you've got 2 DraftKings tournaments that, you get the $1 million one. It's $100 buy-in, but a less field, I think it's like 25,000 people, which, I think it's, if you typically put 10 lineups in or 5 lineups in, put one solid lineup into that, you're going to have a lot better opportunity of at least, A, cashing, but actually maybe, hey, win it all. That's what we're here for. So let's talk about Rahm. Why is Rahm so highly owned? All right, so let's break them down. POA is his best putting surface. He's done over his last, shoot all the way back for his last 87 tournaments. The guy has no red. And what I mean by that is in the 5 shot categories: shot gain total, tee to green, off the tee, approach, around the green, putting, he's gaining strokes in every one. So, no holes. Ended up 4th at the Tour Championship. Won the BMW, which again was Olympia Fields, which was the toughest conditions probably that they've seen all year. And he won the Memorial, which I just already mentioned that, was also toughest conditions from a course, from a weather perspective. He had a 6th at the Northern Trust. I don't think I need to go into a whole lot more. I mean, the guy on paper, should, minimum, if he doesn't win, top 10, top 5. So again, understand why the ownership's high, but just to let you know, he is one of the highest owned players. Xander Schauffele, he was also at over the 20% owned. Let's take a quick look at Xander. Again, POA is his best putting surface. The only knock that he has, if you look over his last 5 tournaments, he was losing a stroke, just a hair over a stroke on approach, but everything else is green over his last 95 tournaments. He ended up 2nd at the Tour Championship. Not maybe the greatest finish. He had a field of 70. Ended up 25th at the BMW. But he had a 10th at the PGA. Again, Xander always shows up big. You know what? And let's, what I didn't do for Rahm, but we should pull up, over the last 3 U.S. Opens that he's been in. So this is 2019, 18, 17 for Schauffele. He has a 3rd, a 6th, and a 5th. So again, but let's reemphasize that these are all at different courses. The last time they played the U.S. Open at Wingfoot was, again, Jeff Ogilvy won, 2006. So that's why I looked more at the comp courses than just weighing, hey, how have you done at the U.S. Open? But it is the mental aspect. It is the conditions, how they set the course up. Like Marion is a par 70. So, there's a lot of similarities. So, we're going to go off some comps. We're also going to go off past U.S. history, U.S. Open history. Let me go back to Rahm just real quick, just so I remember. So Rahm at the U.S. Open in 2019, he ended up 3rd, but actually missed the cut in the 2 previous U.S. Opens in 18 and 17, and in 2016 had 23rd. So I just want to put that in there because I skipped over that part. All right, last player that is super chalk right now, over 20%, is Tyrrell Hatton. And let's take a look at Tyrrell. POA is his best putting surface too. So all 3 of you guys like the POA. And if you look at his last 5 tournaments, the only thing that was negative was on the putting. He was losing a stroke 0.3, so a little over a stroke to the field. But if you look over his last 62 tournaments, everything's green except for his last 5, the putter. He ended up 7th at the Tour Championship. Around the green hurt him a little. The BMW, again, at Olympia Fields, the putter hurt him. That was it. He was positive or else. The Northern Trust, I'm not going to look at that. We'll kind of skip that one. Everybody looked at kind of pretty well. Let's look at U.S. Open. All right, 2019, he ended up 21st, and off the tee, he lost a stroke, a little over, almost a stroke and a half, so that's what hurt him. And then 2018 had a sixth place, and then miscut the 2017. And for whatever reason, I don't have other stats other than just shot gain total. So, of course, in 2018, he gained 11 strokes total and lost a stroke and a half in the miscut in 2017. So again, understand, why Xander, is looked, or I'm sorry, why Terrell is looked about favorably. But my job here is to find you some pivots. And so that is what we're going to do. So Tommy Fleetwood. Let's take a look at Tommy. So Tommy was popping on the models, and I know Tommy's recent form hasn't been, nothing to write home about, but let me see if I can sell you on why I think Tommy might be a strong pivot at just a little over 10% ownership. POA is his favorite putting surface. Over the last 5 tournaments, tee to green, he's lost a stroke, and approach is what's really been hurting him the most. But everything else is solid. Let's see what he did here. He had a 29th at the PGA. He had a 3rd at the Honda. But since the restart, it hasn't been great. He had a miscut at the 3M, a 35th at the St. Jude, a 59th at the Wyndham, and a 44th at the Northern Trust. And it's just been the approach. The approach is killing him. But his putter, he's gaining, 4.8 at the Wyndham and 6.2 at Northern Trust. But if you look at Tommy Boy's past history at the U.S. Open, there's the good and the bad. So last year, he ended up 65th, made the cut, but struggled off the tee and really struggled, around the green and putting. So it was not the best. But in 2018, he had a 2nd place at the U.S. Open, gaining, shot gains total, and that's all I have, is over 15 strokes on the field. And 2017, he had a 4th place, gaining over 15 shots on the field. 2015, he had a 27th, gained almost 6 shots off the field. So if you look at the 4 appearances for Tommy in the U.S. Open, 2 have been top 5, and then you had a 65th and a 27th. So Tommy usually brings his A game to the U.S. Open. Now, like I said, I think his pedigree, that he loves POA. He just seems to show up a lot like even Xander. So I like Tommy. I will be buying in some Tommy shares. Paul Casey. Let me see if I can get you excited about Paul. He's coming in at a little over 13% ownership. POA is not his best putting surface. It's actually his worst. Where he has struggled is actually around the green. Everything else for history, last 5 tournaments, if you want to just go with that, around the green has been losing about a stroke. But the putter has been positive, which is, a little unique. If you look at, over his last 20 events, the putter has been hurt. But around the green is where, Paul's going to struggle. Let's take a look at recent form. At the BMW, he had a 16th. Around the green, he lost 2.4 strokes. At the PGA, he had a great showing, and actually was positive everywhere. And that is solid. But let's take a look at his U.S. Open history. So at the U.S. Open, which he's played, it's about 10 times. He had a 21st last year, a 16th in 2018, a 26th in 2017, a miscut, a 39th, a 56th, a 45th, and a 15th in 2006. So, and a couple of miscuts. So overall, his U.S. Open experience, if I had to rate it, I'd give it a B-. I mean, he's got a 16th and a 15th. I think Winged Foot suits his game. Very accurate off the tee. Great approach. If he can, if he gets in trouble, he can get the around the green game going. And we're going to need the putter, and that's probably I'd say that my biggest worry is POA is not his best surface, and he's already not the greatest putter, but tee to green, he's solid. So again, if you're looking to pivot, I don't think Paul can win it, but I think he could definitely give you a top 20, maybe even, a top 10. All right. I did mention Matthew Wolf. He was popping in the model. So let's take a look what was making me excited. So let's do ownership first. So Wolf's ownership is 12.4, so just a little over 12%. POA is his favorite putting surface by far. Around the greens where he struggled too, and that's just forever. If you take his last 29 tournaments, he's lost, somewhere almost a stroke around the green. Everywhere else, solid. He's been amazing off the tee, amazing on approach. The putter, he is gaining a little, 0.3 of a stroke. So, but with POA, let's just hope that that even increases that. Recent form, so Olympia Fields, the BMW, he had a 16th. At the PGA, had a 4th. His highlights, second place at the Rocket and a 12th at 3M. So that's all kind of recent form. And he has never played at the Open. So there's nothing we're really glean for that. So what we're taking is the accuracy off the tee, good with the long approaches. POA is his best putting surface. So, I think it's a nice pivot. Let's take a look at Hideki. He was, I think, ranked #1 in the model that I did. If you looked at the comp courses I picked. So POA is just a neutral putting surface for Hideki, which is a good thing because bent he loses and Bermuda he loses a ton, at least from past history. And the only thing that ever shows up negative for Hideki typically is the putting. So, but over his last 5 rounds, and I talked about this, I believe, at the Tour Championship, when all of a sudden, I think it was at the BMW, he just started sinking everything. It was at Olympia Fields, and that was a very tough course, and he ended up 3rd place at the BMW Olympia Fields. That's what's got me excited. His last 5 events, he's been green across the board, almost gaining a stroke with his putter, which if he's gaining with putting and doing what he typically does, he's going to have a really good finish. He had a 15th at the Tour Championship, a 3rd at the BMW, a bunch of, 20 finishes between the Northern and the PGA at a 22nd. So great recent form. And the putter, he said, he didn't go into deep details, but he did say that he worked on his putting stroke and found something that has been helping him, and he's confident with it, and that's huge. Let's go take a look at Hideki's U.S. Open performance. So 2019, he ended up 21st. 2018, he had a 16th. 2017, he came in 2nd. 2016, he had a miscut. 2015, an 18th. And he's played the U.S. Open 7 times, and every time his worst finish was in 2014 at a 30. Well, I take that back. He had a miscut 2016, but actually after that, his next worst finish was 2014 at 35th. But he had a 10th place in 2013. Everything's a top 20 and a 2nd place, like I said, 2017. So if he can keep doing what he's been doing and the putter stays hot, I think he's a great pivot. And it's not super chalk at this moment. All right, another pivot, Matthew Fitzpatrick, coming in at 18%. So that's a little higher owned than typically what I'd like for Matthew to be at, but his skill set just fits this course. Now, Bermuda is his best putting surface by far. POA is just neutral for him. Last 5 tournaments, the approach is just I don't even want to count it, but it is a red. It's a 0.1. Around the green is where he's been struggling. But putter, as you know, if you know Matthew, he's just got an amazing putter. He ended up with a 6 at the BMW, but before that, he had a miscut at Northern Trust and a miscut at the PGA, but then had a 6 at WGC and a 3rd at Memorial. So if we look at this, what I'm looking at is Olympia Fields, BMW, 6th place, and then Memorial, Jack's place, he ended up at a 3rd. Now that's 2 of the toughest tournaments of this year. And then if you look at his past history at the U.S. Open, he's actually got, a really pretty strong past history. He's played in the event 5 times. He ended up 12th in 2019, a 12th again in 2018, and then a 35th, a 54, and a 48th. So again, do I think Fitzpatrick, would he win this outright? No. Do I think he could get you a top, 15th, top 20? For sure. And so he is someone that I'll be looking in my lineups. Mr. Colin Matsuyama, our only major winner of the year. POA is just barely a negative putting surface for him. Bermuda is his worst. His favorite is bent. And if you look over his past 10 tournaments and all the key categories, he's all green across the board. He had a 6th place, actually made a charge at the Tour Championship, just, too far back to begin with, and DJ just didn't fall back. Ended up with a 20th at the BMW, so that's, again, looking at Olympia Fields. Of course, won at Harding Park, which was another TPC Harding Park, which was another comp course. I like Memorial. He ended up 48th. So, you could look at it. He actually lost the most strokes he's ever lost putting ever. It was at the Memorial, and that was 8.3. Let me just curious off the top of my head. I don't know what. Okay, so it's bent grass. So that shows us that's his worst. Actually, Bermuda's his worst, but yeah, he's never. If I take a look at Morikawa's history since he's been on tour, which has only been, yeah, he's never lost that many strokes ever. This only other time was at the API back in 2018. He lost 7.6 strokes putting. So that is what happened at the Memorial. It was just a putter. Everything else he was doing pretty well. So. And U.S. Open, he ended up, I don't know if that was an amateur or he was a professional status, but he had a 35th last year at the U.S. Open, Pebble Beach. I'm guessing that's an amateur. I think even Victor Hovland played in that. I sometimes get it mixed up. Only negative he had was off the tee. He lost a stroke, but everything else he did well. And again, but that was Pebble Beach. So I am liking Colin, and he's coming in at 15% ownership. Mr. Lechez Rivi. I like some Ches for this one. The only positive putting surface Ches has is actually POA, and it's barely over neutral, but it is positive. Bermuda, he can't stand, and bent grass is neutral for him. Well, Ches, of course, we just talked about his putter is what holds him back. But, it's losing just a little to, well, if you look at literally his last 244 tournaments, he typically loses somewhere between a half a stroke to a stroke. Over his last 5, he's been losing a stroke. So the putter's been what's been hurting him. The recent tournament he just played in at the Safeway, which I'm not saying that's a comp, just he ended up 3rd, so in good recent form. At the PGA, he had a 75th place, so he at least made the cut, I believe. Yes, made the cut. At Jack's place, the Memorial, he had a 22nd, and he didn't play the BMW, so we don't have anything to look at there. But if we look at past history at the U.S., so last year he ended up in 3rd place at Pebble Beach, so it was a great showing, and he was green across the board. The putter was his worst, but he was still at least over neutral. So again, I look at if he can do that this week. Again, he's one of the straightest drivers, not the longest. Great approach. Good around the green, but approach and off the tee typically is where he's going to make his hay. He has been in the U.S. Open 6 times. I did mention the 3rd place last year. He missed a cut in 2018. 2017, he had a 16th. Missed a cut in 2012, a 62 in 2004, and then a missed cut in 2003. So nothing really to glean, except if you look at the last 3 U.S. Opens, he had a 3rd, a 16th, and a missed cut. So I do like that form. And last on my pivots is Justin Rose. Nobody is really talking about Justin Rose. I almost put him under my sleepers just for that reason. And I know he's had some really weird recent form. really even before that, he was just not playing the same, but he got off that Hanema clubs, got back to his clubs, had a real, kind of a bright spot, and then it seemed like he regressed a little bit. Let's break down Rose and let's just see, what's going on here and why I think he could be a good pivot. So his last 5 tournaments, it's really just been around the green is where he's lost strokes. If you look at his last 20 tournaments, it's actually been around the green. He's still gaining on approach, still gaining off the tee. The putter has been good, yeah, I mean, it's gaining. It's not been great. Either he gains like a half a stroke almost or loses like 0.1. So nothing really there to glean. He had a 25th at the Northern Trust, but the big tournaments, if you kind of look at his history, he had a 9th at the PGA. He did miss the cut at Memorial, but this, again, I believe he had 3 missed cuts in a row in June, July. He had the Travelers, the Workday, and the Memorial. And he miscut all those. And what was hurting him was the approach. I mean, really, he was just struggling with almost every category, except he's been green off the tee, even with his miscut at the API. So let's look at the U.S. Open history and why I liked Justin Rose. So he's played the U.S. Open about 10 times. 2019, last year, he had a 3rd place. He had a 10th in 2018. He did miss the cut in 2017 and 16, but before that, he had a 27th place in 2015, and he had a 12th in 2014 and won the U.S. Open in 2013. And I want to believe that was Marion, but let me see. Yeah. And it was on Marion, which is a par 70. I don't know if it was Moa, but it is less than yardage, about 250 yards less in length, but scoring was very difficult. But yeah, I think, I'm not saying it's a comp course, but there is some similarities there. I'm trying to see if there was anything else that we want to look at with Justin. He also had a 5th place in 2013, or 2003. That was a while ago. So if you look at the totality, he's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 11 times he's played, quite a few. And he has 1, 2, 3, 4 top 10s with a 1st, a 3rd, a 5th, a 10th, and then a 12th, a 27th, and a 21st. So, and out of the total, he has had 3 missed cuts. So again, I don't know if I think he's going to win the tournament, but it wouldn't shock me that he could definitely, I think he for sure, if I had to give for sure a top 20, but even could break the top 10. And so for 8.7%, I think it's a great pivot and someone to look at. That's my thoughts. Okay. Let's get on to my sleepers. So who's the guys that I think are going to, show up that, aren't on people's radars and definitely be talking about. So I already mentioned, we saw that in the model that Brian Harman was coming up. And Brian, if you know him, his game, I kind of think of him a lot like Ches Reavie. It's not the longest, but very accurate off the tee. POA is his favorite putting surface, almost gaining a half stroke on average when he plays that. He's had pretty good recent form. I think really good for him, really good recent form. So at Olympia Fields, the BMW ended up in 12th place. And actually that was, really losing strokes off the tee and approach and still ended up at a 12th. The Northern Trust, he ended up 11th, which, I'm not saying that's a comp. And at PGA Championship, he had a 58th. If we look at his past experience at the U.S. Open, 2018, so he didn't make it last year. I don't know why he didn't play. I don't know if he didn't make it just, I guess, due to his ranking or if he just wasn't in the field due to something else. But 2018, he had a 36th place. And in 2017, he actually ended up in second place, and right behind old Brooks Koepka. So that's pretty good. And again, I don't think he's on a lot of people's radar. I mean, he's less than 10% owned right now, but I will be having some shares of Mr. Brian Harman. Now, it's hard to say Jason Day is a sleeper, but really, right now his projected ownership is like 7%, and nobody's talking about him. And it's kind of interesting, right? I mean, I'm not a huge Jason Day fan, as in for fantasy. I think he's a great guy, great golfer. But, he's got me a couple times with the back. But why I think he's relevant to look at here is POA is his best putting surface. Again, almost gains a half stroke when putting on POA. If we look at his last 5 tournaments, the guy's been in great form now. He's been gaining with the putter, but I think he's got more to gain there. Off the tee and approach has been pretty much neutral, as in he's not gaining or losing, but is still not not in the red. And then if you go back his past 20 tournaments, the only area he was struggling was approach, and was losing about a half stroke to the field. So if we look at recent form, if you look, and I think this is why no one's talking about Day. So if you look at the BMW Olympia Fields, he struggled. He ended up at 64th position out of 70. Again, so we all understand that no cut event. And he lost. Approach was just dreadful, almost 8 strokes. Off the tee, he was losing 3 strokes. Around the green was great. His putting, was good. And then the Northern Trust, he struggled too, and actually missed a cut. But if you look before that, he had a 4th at the PGA Championship, a 6th at the WGC St. Jude, a 4th at Memorial, which we already talked about, how tough the course and conditions were, and a 7th at the Workday. So he went from almost a top 5 machine for 4 events in a row, and then struggled. So I don't know this. I didn't see anything, but what I glean is there was probably the back, something physically, I think, happened. You don't go from 4 events over a month period of time, a 7th, a 4th, a 6th, and a 4th, and then a miscut at the Northern Trust at TPC Boston, which was a cakewalk for these guys. And then almost last, there was only 69 in the field at BMW. So, I think something physically, but he's had quite a bit of time, right? That was, almost 3 weeks ago. So hopefully whatever it was is healed, and we get the Jason Day back that was cooking. And if you can get him at 7.2, we know mentally he's got the pedigree. And then if we go look at his U.S. Open past experience, it's pretty solid. Now, in last year, he ended up in 21st. And then he had 2 missed cuts in 2018 and 17. But before that, 2016 to 2013, all was in top 10. So he had a 2nd place in 2013, a 4th in 2014, a 9th in 2015, an 8th in 2016. So the guy could play U.S. Opens. And so I'm going to be having me some Jason Day. I would recommend it too. You need a differentiator to crack that. And, if you go with what historical information tells you, I think it's pretty solid from, recent form to U.S. Open. I think, like I said, I think there was just a little hiccup there, maybe physically. Something went on because he went from playing amazing golf, or he just had a great month, I mean, you can look at it that way too, but I'm going to go with the latter. All right, someone else that went from the greatest golfer everybody wants to talk about to, no way possible he can do anything at this course, and that's Bryson DeChambeau. And it's funny enough is that, everybody always said if the Masters comes along or any course that you have to really think your way through and really take your time and calculate your, your next moves, your course management, is Bryson DeChambeau. He's the guy that you would look upon. So in this course, you're going to need that. Now, I've also been watching a lot of Bryson, and I think he's been struggling. He's been, getting a little crazy off the tee. The putter hasn't been where it was. But if we kind of just take a step back and let's just look at the data, what it's telling us. So first off, POA is his favorite putting surface. He almost gains over 0.3 strokes when he's on POA, so better than the average surface. If you look at his last 5 tournaments, his approach is what's been hurting him and around the green. You know, actually, if you look at the last 20 tournaments, that's been about the same thing. It's just gotten a little worse. The approach has gotten a little worse, and around the green got a little worse. But if we look at the totality of just kind of looking at recent form, so he ended up 22nd at the Tour Championship, you know, which wasn't great. You know, again, that was a field of 30. The BMW, he ended up 50th, again, a field of 69, and he had a miscut at Northern Trust. So if you take the FedEx playoffs, that's pretty much what's got Bryson DeChambeau at 4% ownership. But if you look past that, he had a 4th at the PGA, again, a pretty comparable course. He did miss the cut at Memorial, but then, of course, he won the Rocket Mortgage. He had a 6th at the Travelers, an 8th at the RBC, a 3 at Charles Schwab, a 4th at Arnold Palmer. You know, I mean, since the Genesis, so if you take February to mid-July, he never did worse than 8th place. Now, you could argue, you know, shorter courses, so he was just gaining so much off the tee, which he was. But if he doesn't play the game of I want to hit it 400 yards and starts hitting, you know, for him, hitting the hybrids, hitting, you know, 2 irons, you know, whatever it is, he's still going to be getting the distance he needs and gaining on the accuracy. If we look at Bryson's past U.S. Open experience, I wouldn't say it's stellar. He's played in the event 5 times. His best finish was 2016. He had a 15th. 2018, he had a 25th, and then last year he had a 35th. But again, I'm not saying Bryson is who I would be picking to win. Of course, I'm just saying for that low of ownership, and again to gain some, you know, leverage on the field, even if he gets you a top 20, and also Bryson is, you know, from a fantasy perspective, I'm not saying on this course, you know, people are going to be out having a birdie fest, but he does generate some points. More than the average. So again, I'm going to have him some lineups, again, from a differentiator perspective. Matt Wallace with the crazy hair. Matt, just in short, just shows up for big tournaments. I mean, I'm not a big one to roster him in a lot of different events, but something about if you just the U.S. Opens and the Open and the Masters, like when it comes to majors and difficult to score courses or just difficult conditions, period, he typically does pretty well. POA is his best putting surface. He's gaining almost a half a stroke when he's on that surface over the average. The only thing that's hurt him for the last 28 tournaments has been his approach. That's it. The only thing red is his approach. And that's typically he loses between a stroke to about a stroke to about stroke and a half. If you look at recent history, he had a miscut at the Wyndham. That was his last tournament here. He had a 77th at the PGA. But at the Memorial, he had a 4th. And that's one of the courses that I'm definitely looking at, you know, over this. He didn't play in the BMW, so we can't look at Olympia. But he did have a 4th place at Memorial, which was under very tough conditions. And then if you look at his U.S. Open experience, he's only played in the event 3 times. But in 2019, he did have a 12th place finish. He did miss the cut prior years, so 2 events prior, but I do like that 12th place. I do like what he typically brings. Let me look at, I just quickly want to see here. So it wasn't Masters. Let's see the Open. So 51st at the Open in 2019. And I think we already said the PGA Championship. So in 2019, he had a 3rd, and this year he had a 17th, and then the PGA Championship in 2018, he had a 19th. Again, I'm just looking at some correlations in big major tournaments because for some odd reason, he just always pops up there in the big events. So I like Matt Wallace, again, just a differentiator, less than 4% owned. And then my last sleeper is a Mr. the Bulldog, Kevin Kisner. This guy, when it comes to difficult courses, so if you would have watched, it wasn't this year, but it would have been the Dell match play WGC event, you know, when he won it all there. It was some rough conditions. It was, you know, the course was tough, and it was not the best weather by any stretch. Cool, cloudy, some rain, and you know, and he won. Beat, you know, head to head, beat some really strong players. Beat Rory McIlroy. So this guy, when he gets in a dogfight, he can fight. And if you look at just the recent form for Kevin, you know, he had a 23rd at the Tour Championship that, you know, that he was even there. So the top 30 best players of the year, he ended up 23rd. He had a 25th at Olympia Fields, the BMW. He had a 4th at Northern Trust and a 3rd at Wyndham. He ended up 19th at the PGA this year and a 3rd at the Rocket Mortgage. And if you look at Kevin's past history at the U.S. Open, it's not stellar, but he's been in the event 6 times. So, you know, it's not going to be any all-shot. It's not going to be like Morikawa or Wolf or some of the guys that, you know, that's either not played there professionally. Like I said, 12th in 2015. Last year he had a 49th, missed a cut in 2018, a 58 in 2017, a 49th in 2016. So I like Kevin Kisner's skill set for this. You know, an amazing putter. You're going to need that. Pretty accurate off the tee. Great with approach. Yeah, I think he's set up. And again, so with that kind of ownership, I think he could help you differentiate. And now for who I am picking to win this bad dog. That's right, Webb Simpson. And you're going to say, well, Kirk, you picked Webb Simpson. So it's kind of funny. I wanted him in the BMW, and he didn't play, right? He took the time off for the Tour Championship, and also that course, you know, maybe wasn't the best fit. And then went and played in the Tour Championship, and I think he just knocked some rust off first 2 days. You know, had that 4-over, and then he really got it going the last 2 days. You know, and I really looked and just kind of thought about this. Who do I think? You know, I mean, there's the DJs, there's, you know, Rahm, you got McIlroy, you got Justin Thomas, but you know, as you see, Mr. Simpson is a past U.S. Open champion. And let's just break it down. Why did I end up picking Mr. Webb? So POA is his second best putting surface, Bermuda being his first, but POA is right next to it. You know, does well in difficult rounds. He's green. If you look at, funny enough, his last 229 tournaments, he has not one red area. His last 5 tournaments, you know, I guess if you're gonna find any hole, gaining strokes off the tee, he hits a ton of fairways, but he's, you know, not super long. He's PGA neutral, kind of what I was saying, where, but tee to green, he's gaining almost over 4 strokes. Recent history, at 12th at the Tour Championship, so, you know, he did make a run, as I mentioned, Saturday and Sunday, struggled on Thursday, Friday. All right, take that back. It was a Friday start. So struggled Friday, Saturday. Maybe that's what threw him off. Sunday, Monday made a nice comeback. A 6th at the Northern Trust, a 3rd at the Wyndham, a 37th at the PGA. He did miss the cut at Memorial. That's a little bit of a red flag for me. But, you know, he won the RBC Heritage. He won at a 3rd at Sony and had a win the WMPO, the Waste Management. For a moment, it took me a second to figure out what the heck that stood for. I mean, he's had a great season. Recently, I mean, if you look at the Tour Championship, you know, where he struggled was around the green and putter, which is just rare. That, you know, funny enough, I take it all and throw it out the window and just hit it. I think he just had a bad putting for the first couple of days for whatever reason, which is not like him. And then if we look at his U.S. Open experience, this is what I liked. Of course, as I mentioned, he had the win in 2012. But in 2016, I'm sorry, last year, 2019, he had a 16th, 2018, a 10th, 2017, a 35th. And he's only missed a cut once out of his 8 appearances. That was in 2016, and then a 46th, 45th, and a 32. So, you know, let me see. I'm just curious. If we look at, I want to see what the 2018 were off the top of my head. I don't remember. Shinnecock. So there we go. So I think the perfect comp course, or one of the top comp courses, is Shinnecock Hills. It is a par 70. It is over 7,400 yards in length, and it is POA. So when people say, well, yep, Simpson is the par 70, god, but he can't, it's got to be a short par 70. Well, I think I beg to differ. And then if we go back, and I already know the answer is Pebble Beach was the other one. So class, so we had a 10th, so we had a 16th at Pebble Beach, and then let's see where he won it in 2012. Just off the top of my head, I don't recall. The Olympic Club. So funny enough, right down the road, TPC, yeah, across the street from TPC, Harding Park, which is a par 70. I don't know what the grass was there off the top of my head. Okay, just curious. I don't have the length there. That was a while ago. But again, that's who I'm picking. I appreciate you again for you guys attending. I hope you got some insights, have a better feeling for what you need to be looking for, some pivots that you can do, who to kind of, not fades, but just if you're trying to differentiate. Again, if you look at the top three players that I mentioned, Rahm, Xander, and Terrell, I don't think it's a problem to have one of them in your lineup at all. If you put all three in your lineup, again, you're just, you can already understand you're gonna kind of be with everybody else. Well, the majority of the field. So, best of luck, and I hope you win it all. And knowing is just half the battle. Have a great one.